The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the sprawling, dusty streets of central Florida, where the air clung heavy with the scent of damp earth and magnolia blooms. In the distance, the relentless hum of traffic on the interstate was a constant reminder of life moving forward, while Liza Drake felt stuck in place. Liza's small, two-bedroom apartment sat in a crumbling complex at the edge of town, where peeling paint and broken blinds hinted at better days long gone. Inside, the space was neat but tired, much like Liza herself. The floral curtains she'd hung in a futile attempt to brighten the living room only served as a stark contrast to the cracked linoleum floor and faded furniture. A few toys were scattered across the carpet, remnants of the day's playtime with her daughter, Emma. Emma was everything to Liza. At just 5 years old, she was a bright, joyful child with curly brown hair that framed her cherubic face. Liza often watched her sleep, marveling at how peaceful and untouched by the world's hardships she appeared. It was in those quiet moments that Liza's resolve to provide a better life for Emma hardened. But as a high school dropout with no real prospects, Liza felt the weight of that dream pressing down on her more heavily each day. The local diner where she worked barely paid enough to cover the rent, and the tips were as meager as the portions they served. Nights were the hardest. After putting Emma to bed, Liza would sit at the kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills, wondering how she would keep the lights on for another month. The future loomed like a dark cloud, full of uncertainty and fear, but there was something else, too, a spark of determination that refused to be extinguished. Liza had always been scrappy, a fighter in her own quiet way. She wasn't content to let life drag her down without a struggle. There had to be something more out there, something better. She just needed to find it. The allure of a better life haunted her dreams. She imagined a world where she and Emma lived in a cozy house with a yard, where they could plant flowers and watch them grow. A place where Emma could attend a good school, and where Liza wouldn't have to worry about how she'd pay for her next meal. It wasn't luxury she craved, but security, a life where she could breathe easy for the first time in years. Opportunity, however, seemed like a distant fantasy in this part of Florida, where hope was as scarce as well-paying jobs. But Liza had heard whispers, talk of new businesses springing up in the nearby towns, of people getting rich overnight. The stories were enough to keep her going, to keep her searching. Maybe one day, she would stumble upon the chance she so desperately needed. That day came sooner than she expected. On a sweltering afternoon in August, as Liza finished up her shift at the diner, she noticed a flyer pinned to the community bulletin board near the entrance. It was bright and flashy, promising a life-changing opportunity at a new pharmaceutical startup. No experience necessary, it read. Just ambition, drive, and a willingness to learn. Liza's heart raced as she tore the flyer from the board. Could this be it? Could this be the opportunity she'd been waiting for? She didn't know it yet, but that little piece of paper would be the key to unlocking a door that would change her life forever, though not in the way she imagined. The path ahead was fraught with danger and deception, but in that moment, all Liza could see was the glimmer of hope it offered. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, a better life was within reach. The morning air was thick with humidity as Liza Drake made her way through the strip mall, a jumble of old and new shops strung together in a weary line. She clutched the flyer in her hand, its corners already softened from the nervous grip she'd kept on it since she first saw it. The bright red letters, "No experience necessary," shouted up at her, filling her with equal parts hope and anxiety. She approached the address listed on the flyer, a modest storefront with frosted windows that offered no hint of what lay behind them. Above the door, a sign read, "Innovative Health Solutions." It was a far cry from the glitzy headquarters she'd imagined, but Liza wasn't about to let appearances deter her. She needed this job, needed it like she needed as she stepped inside. A blast of cool, air-conditioned air hit her, a welcome relief from the oppressive heat outside. The lobby was surprisingly modern, with sleek furniture and abstract art on the walls. A receptionist, a young woman with a polished demeanor and a headset, greeted Liza with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Innovative Health Solutions. Do you have an appointment?" the receptionist asked, her tone crisp but not unfriendly. No. I saw the flyer," Liza stammered, holding it up as if it were a golden ticket. The receptionist's eyes flicked to the flyer, then back to Liza. "Of course. We've had a lot of interest. Mr. Harlow is conducting interviews today. Please fill out this application, and I'll let him know you're here." Liza took the clipboard with trembling hands and sat down in one of the lobby chairs. The application was standard: name, address, work history, but filling it out felt like a test she wasn't sure she'd pass. Her work history was sparse, just a few short-lived jobs at diners and retail stores, nothing that screamed ambition or drive. But she wrote carefully, determined to make the best impression she could. As she handed the clipboard back, the receptionist nodded approvingly. "Thank you. Mr. Harlow will see you now. Follow me, please." Liza's heart pounded in her chest as she followed the receptionist down a narrow hallway, the sound of her own footsteps echoing in her ears. They stopped at a door at the end of the hall, and the receptionist knocked lightly before opening it. "Mr. Harlow, this is Liza Drake. She's here about the position." The man behind the desk looked up from a stack of papers, his expression unreadable. Barry Harlow was in his late 40s, with a lean build and a sharp, calculating gaze. His dark hair was slicked back, and he wore a tailored suit that looked slightly out of place in the unassuming surroundings. He gestured for Liza to sit in the chair opposite his desk. "Thank you, Melanie," he said to the receptionist, who quietly closed the door as she left. Barry leaned back in his chair, studying Liza for a moment before speaking. "So, Ms. Drake, you're interested in the position here at Innovative Health Solutions?" "Yes, sir," Liza replied, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling up inside her. "I saw the flyer and thought I might be a good fit." Barry raised an eyebrow. "And what makes you think that?" Liza hesitated, searching for the right words. "I'm a quick learner, and I work hard. I may not have much experience in this field, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to succeed." Barry nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. "Ambition is good, but it's not enough on its own. This business is about results. We're a small company, but we're growing fast. Our products have the potential to change lives, but we need the right people to help us get there. Liza listened intently, her mind racing. She had no idea what exactly the company did, but the prospect of being part of something big, something important, was intoxicating. What exactly would I be doing here? She asked, eager to learn more. Barry smiled, a thin, calculated smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. We're in the business of pharmaceuticals, Ms. Drake. Cutting-edge solutions to everyday health problems. Your role would be in sales, identifying potential clients, making connections, and closing deals. It's a fast-paced environment, and the rewards are significant for those who can keep up. Sales. The word sent a shiver of both excitement and fear down Liza's spine. She'd never worked in sales before, but she could see how it might be the opportunity she needed. If she could succeed here, maybe she could finally give Emma the life she deserved. What kind of training would I receive? Liza asked, trying to mask her uncertainty with a show of professionalism. Barry's smile widened slightly. We have a comprehensive training program. You'll learn everything you need to know, from product knowledge to closing techniques. As long as you're willing to put in the effort, you'll do just fine. Liza nodded, feeling a surge of determination. I'm willing. Barry leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. I like that attitude, Ms. Drake. We're looking for people who aren't afraid to take risks, who are hungry for success. Tell me, why do you want this job? Liza hesitated for a moment, then decided to be honest. I want a better life for my daughter. I want to be able to provide for her, to give her the opportunities one never had. Barry's gaze softened slightly, and for the first time, Liza thought she saw a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes. Admirable. Very admirable. Well, Ms. Drake, I'm willing to give you a chance. If you can prove yourself, there's no limit to how far you can go here. Liza felt a rush of relief and excitement. Thank you, Mr. Harlow. I won't let you down. Barry nodded, the thin smile returning to his face. We'll see about that. Report back here tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp. Melanie will get you started with the paperwork and your initial training. Welcome to Innovative Health Solutions, Ms. Drake. As Liza left the office, her mind was racing. She had no idea what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like her life was about to change, hopefully for the better. The next morning, Liza arrived at Innovative Health Solutions well before 8 a.m., nerves and excitement mingling in her stomach. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft, golden light over the strip mall, and the parking lot was still mostly empty. Liza took a deep breath, adjusted her thrift store blazer, and walked into the building. Melanie, the receptionist from the day before, greeted her with a smile as she entered. Good morning, Ms. Drake. Right on time. Mr. Harlow appreciates punctuality. Thank you, Liza replied, trying to match Melanie's polished demeanor. Follow me, Melanie said, leading Liza down the now familiar hallway. They stopped at a small conference room where a stack of papers and a laptop awaited her. This is where you'll be getting started today. I'll walk you through the onboarding process, and then you'll begin your training. For the next hour, Liza filled out forms and signed contracts, her hand cramping from the sheer volume of paperwork. The documents were dense with legal jargon she barely understood, but she signed where Melanie indicated, trusting that this was just the standard procedure. Once the paperwork was done, Melanie handed Liza a sleek tablet and a company badge with her name and photo. This tablet will be your primary tool. It has everything you need: product catalogs, client databases, and sales scripts. You'll also find training modules that you'll need to complete by the end of the week. Today, though, you'll be shadowing one of our top salespeople to get a feel for how we operate. Liza nodded, clutching the tablet tightly. Who will I be shadowing? That would be Doug. He's been with the company since the beginning, so you'll be in good hands. Follow me, and I'll introduce you. They walked down another corridor lined with closed doors, each one labeled with a nameplate. Melanie stopped in front of one that read, Doug Harrison, and knocked briskly before opening it. Doug, this is Liza Drake. She'll be shadowing you today. Doug looked up from his desk, where he was typing away on his computer. He was a tall man in his early 30s, with a confident air and a broad, easygoing smile that immediately put Liza at ease. Ah, the new recruit, Doug said, standing up and offering his hand. Nice to meet you, Liza. Ready to dive in? Liza shook his hand, grateful for his friendly demeanor. Yes, definitely. Great. Let's get started. Have a seat. Doug gestured to a chair across from his desk. As Liza sat down, Doug began explaining the basics of the company's operations. Innovative Health Solutions, he explained, specialized in developing and distributing over-the-counter supplements and medications that promise to address common health issues, everything from weight loss to chronic pain relief. The products were marketed as cutting-edge, scientifically backed solutions that were both effective and affordable. The key to our success, Doug said, leaning forward, is how we position our products. We're not just selling pills, we're selling hope, relief, a better life. People are willing to pay for that, especially when they believe they're getting something exclusive and top-notch. Liza nodded, absorbing every word. It made sense. People were desperate for solutions to their problems, and if Innovative Health Solutions could provide that, then the sales would follow. Now, the business model, Doug continued, is based on direct sales. We don't rely on traditional retail channels. Instead, we sell directly to consumers through targeted marketing campaigns and a network of sales representatives, people like you and me. It's a high-touch approach, which means we build relationships with our clients, earn their trust, and keep them coming back for more. Liza listened intently, her mind racing with the possibilities. This was more than just selling, this was about connecting with people, understanding their needs, and offering them solutions. She could do that. She wanted to do that. Today, Doug said, we're going to focus on learning the ropes, how to pitch the products, how to handle objections, and how to close deals. It's a lot to take in at first, but don't worry. You'll get the hang of it. He handed Liza a headset, which she put on as Doug clicked a few buttons on his computer, bringing up a list of client names on the screen. We're going to make some calls, Doug explained. You'll listen in for now, and then, later today, you'll try making a few calls yourself. Doug started dialing, and Liza listened closely as he launched into a smooth, well-rehearsed pitch. He was a natural, effortlessly guiding the conversation, addressing the client's concerns, and steering them toward a sale. His voice was calm, reassuring, and persuasive without being pushy. As the day wore on, Liza absorbed everything Doug showed her, the nuances of the product line, the strategies for overcoming objections, and the art of closing a deal. She took meticulous notes, determined to learn as much as possible. In the afternoon, Doug handed the reins over to Liza. "Your turn," he said with an encouraging smile. "Remember, just be yourself. People respond to authenticity." Liza took a deep breath and picked up the phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed the number on the screen. The phone rang once, twice, and then a woman's voice answered. "Hello. Hi, is this Mrs. Johnson?" Liza began, her voice a bit shaky. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Liza Drake from Innovative Health Solutions. I'm calling to share some exciting news about a new product that could really help you with your arthritis pain. Do you have a moment to talk?" The conversation wasn't as smooth as Doug's had been, but Liza managed to keep the woman on the line, addressing her questions and explaining the benefits of the product. When she finally closed the sale, a thrill of excitement rushed through her. "Congratulations," Doug said, patting her on the back. "You just made your first sale." Liza beamed with pride. It wasn't just the sale, it was the realization that she could do this. She could learn, adapt, and succeed. As the day came to an end, Doug walked Liza to the door. "You did great today, Liza. Keep this up, and you'll go far." "Thank you, Doug," Liza replied, her confidence growing. "I'm ready to work hard." As she left the office and stepped out into the warm evening air, Liza felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had a long road ahead of her, but for the first time in a long time, she believed that she could carve out a better life for herself and Emma. The taste of success was sweet, and she was hungry for more. The next few weeks at Innovative Health Solutions flew by in a blur of phone calls, client meetings, and late nights spent studying product manuals. Liza threw herself into the work with a determination she hadn't felt in years. Every sale she made fueled her drive, and every success pushed her to aim even higher. From the moment she stepped into the office each morning, Liza was focused. She had quickly picked up on the nuances of selling and began to develop her own style, blending Doug's polished techniques with her own down-to-earth approach. Clients responded well to her authenticity, and before long, she was bringing in more sales than some of the more seasoned employees. It wasn't long before Barry Harlow, the company's sharp-eyed CEO, took notice. "You're doing some impressive work, Liza," Barry said one afternoon as he stopped by her desk. "Doug tells me you've got a knack for this business." Liza looked up from her computer, surprised but pleased by the compliment. "Thank you, Mr. Harlow. I'm just trying to learn as much as I can." "Call me Barry," he said with a smile. "And it's clear you're more than just learning, you're thriving. I've been reviewing the sales reports, and your numbers are climbing fast. Keep this up, and we'll be having a different conversation very soon." With that, Barry gave her a nod and walked away, leaving Liza with a mix of pride and anticipation. She knew what that different conversation could mean: promotions, raises, and perhaps even a seat at the table where real decisions were made, but it wasn't just her sales numbers that were catching attention. Liza had begun to see opportunities that others overlooked. One day, after reviewing some client feedback, she noticed a pattern. Several customers mentioned a desire for a more convenient way to purchase products, something that didn't require constant phone calls or in-person meetings. Inspired, Liza brainstormed a new initiative, an online platform where clients could reorder products with just a few clicks, track their shipments, and access personalized recommendations based on their purchase history. She spent hours drafting a proposal, outlining the potential benefits to both the clients and the company, and finally gathered the courage to present it to Barry. An online platform? Barry mused as he flipped through her proposal. "It's ambitious." "It is," Liza agreed, "but it's also the future. People are moving online for everything: shopping, banking, even healthcare. If we want to stay ahead of the competition, we need to meet our clients where they are." Barry studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her relief, he nodded. "You make a compelling case, Liza. I'll run this by our tech team and see what they think. In the meantime, keep those ideas coming." The online platform wasn't implemented overnight, but Liza's initiative set things in motion. Over the next few months, she became known around the office not just for her sales skills, but also for her innovative thinking. Her reputation as a rising star began to solidify. With her growing success at work came the inevitable challenges of balancing her professional ambitions with her responsibilities as a mother. Emma, her bright and curious 6-year-old, was Liza's world, but the demands of her job often left her feeling stretched thin. Mornings were a whirlwind of activity, getting Emma dressed, packing lunches, and rushing to drop her off at school before heading to the office. Evenings were equally hectic, with Liza trying to make dinner, help Emma with her homework, and prepare for the next day's meetings. There were nights when Liza collapsed into bed, exhausted, only to wake up a few hours later to review sales reports or answer late-night emails. But despite the challenges, Liza was determined to make it work. She had a vision for her future, and she wasn't going to let anything stand in her way. To keep up with her workload, she hired a reliable babysitter, Clara, who became a godsend, helping with Emma during the evenings when Liza needed to stay late at the office. Clara was warm and attentive, quickly forming a bond with Emma. Knowing that her daughter was in good hands gave Liza the peace of mind she needed to focus on her career. But she made a point of carving out quality time with Emma whenever she could: weekends spent at the park, movie nights with popcorn and ice cream, and bedtime stories that sometimes turned into giggle-filled conversations about Emma's day at school. As Liza's star continued to rise at Innovative Health Solutions, she was promoted to Senior Sales Representative, complete with a significant pay raise and a coveted corner office. The promotion came with new responsibilities: overseeing a team of junior sales reps and taking on more high-profile clients. But Liza was ready for the challenge. She knew that this was just the beginning, that there were even greater opportunities on the horizon if she kept pushing forward. However, the higher Liza climbed, the more she began to notice subtle shifts in the company's atmosphere. Conversations behind closed doors, decisions made without explanation, and a growing sense that not everything at Innovative Health Solutions was as transparent as it seemed. But Liza brushed those thoughts aside, too focused on her goals to dwell on them. For now, Liza was content to ride the wave of her success, knowing that she was building a better life for herself and Emma. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes were getting higher, and that the climb to the top might come with costs she hadn't yet considered. Liza could hardly believe how much her life had transformed in such a short time. Just a year ago, she had been struggling to make ends meet, living paycheck to paycheck in a rundown apartment complex. But now, everything was different. The promotion, the bonuses, and the steady stream of commissions from her sales had given her financial security she had never known before. One of the first changes Liza made was moving out of her cramped apartment and into a more upscale neighborhood. She found a charming 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, complete with a spacious yard where Emma could play safely. The house was everything she had dreamed of, a place where she could build a stable, comfortable life for her daughter. The day they moved in, Liza felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment as she watched Emma run through the new house, her laughter echoing off the freshly painted walls. "Mom, look! My room is so big!" Emma exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. Liza smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "I'm glad you like it, sweetie. We're going to make so many good memories here." As they settled into their new home, Liza began to experience the perks of her elevated social status. She was no longer just another employee at Innovative Health Solutions. She was a rising star, someone whose opinions were sought after, whose ideas were respected. Invitations to exclusive events and high-profile client dinners started to come her way, offering her a glimpse into a world she had never imagined being a part of. At first, Liza was dazzled by the lifestyle that came with her newfound success. She attended cocktail parties at luxurious hotels, where the city's elite gathered to network and discuss business deals. She dined at upscale restaurants with clients who ordered dishes she could barely pronounce, and she found herself in conversations about investments, luxury vacations, and other topics that had once been foreign to her. With the increased income came the temptation to indulge in the finer things. Liza splurged on a designer wardrobe, treating herself to tailored suits, elegant dresses, and expensive heels that made her feel like she belonged in the corporate world. She upgraded her car to a sleek, black sedan that turned heads as she drove through the city, and she didn't hesitate to spoil Emma with new toys, clothes, and anything else her heart desired. Liza also began to socialize more with her colleagues, particularly those who had already made it in the corporate world. She was invited to private parties at Barry Harlow's sprawling mansion, where she mingled with top executives, clients, and investors. The conversations were filled with talk of business ventures and stock market strategies, but also with gossip, backdoor deals, and an undercurrent of competition that was always present. At these gatherings, Liza was introduced to the temptations of the corporate world. She saw how easily success could go to people's heads, leading them to make decisions based on greed rather than ethics. She watched as colleagues indulged in lavish lifestyles, spending their bonuses on extravagant vacations, luxury cars, and expensive art collections. Some even engaged in risky behavior, like excessive drinking or gambling, rationalizing it as part of the high-stakes corporate game. It didn't take long for Liza to realize that the corporate world came with its own set of challenges. The pressure to maintain her success was constant, and she was acutely aware that a single misstep could cost her everything she had worked so hard to achieve. There were times when she felt the weight of expectations pressing down on her, and she found herself questioning whether she was cut out for this life. Despite these doubts, Liza pushed forward, determined to prove herself. She continued to excel at work, impressing Barry and the other executives with her ideas and her ability to close deals. But as she climbed higher up the corporate ladder, the stakes grew ever more dangerous. Liza began to notice the subtle manipulations that occurred behind the scenes, the deals that were made in whispers and sealed with a handshake. She saw how easily ethics could be compromised when there was money on the line, and she started to understand that success in this world often came at a price. But for now, Liza was riding the wave of her success, enjoying the perks of her new life while trying to navigate the murky waters of the corporate world. She knew that the temptations and challenges she faced were just the beginning, and that the higher she climbed, the more difficult it would be to maintain her balance. Yet, she was determined to keep going, to secure the life she had always dreamed of for herself and Emma, no matter the cost. As Liza settled into her new life, the initial thrill of success began to give way to an undercurrent of unease. The longer she worked at innovative health solutions, the more she started to hear whispers, rumors of practices that didn't quite align with the company's polished image. At first, Liza dismissed these murmurs as nothing more than office gossip, but over time, the voices grew louder, and it became harder to ignore the cracks forming in the foundation of her once idyllic workplace. It started with small, seemingly innocuous comments during coffee breaks or after-hours drinks with colleagues. Someone would mention a client who had complained about a product's effectiveness, only to have their concerns brushed aside by upper management. Another would hint at a particularly lucrative deal that had been secured under dubious circumstances. Each time, Liza would nod along, not wanting to appear suspicious or out of the loop, but the seeds of doubt were slowly being planted. One afternoon, Liza overheard a conversation between two colleagues in the break room. They were discussing a new drug the company had recently launched, a supposed game-changer in the treatment of chronic pain. "I heard they fast-tracked the testing phase," one of them said, lowering his voice as if afraid of being overheard. "Apparently, they didn't do the full trials." "Yeah, but it's making us a fortune," the other replied with a shrug. "As long as it sells, who cares, right?" Liza felt a knot form in her stomach. She had always believed in the company's mission to help people, but the idea that they might be cutting corners, putting profit before safety, troubled her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, and that perhaps she had been too blinded by her own success to see it. Her doubts deepened a few days later when she received a message from a former employee named Rachel, someone she vaguely remembered from her early days at the company. Rachel had left suddenly, with no explanation, and Liza hadn't thought much of it at the time. But now, out of the blue, Rachel was asking to meet for coffee, saying there were things Liza needed to know. Curiosity piqued, Liza agreed to meet her at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. As she arrived, she spotted Rachel sitting at a corner table, looking tense and slightly nervous. Liza approached her cautiously, unsure of what to expect. "Thanks for coming," Rachel said as Liza sat down. Her voice was hushed, and she glanced around the cafe as if making sure they weren't being watched. "I know it's been a while, but I felt like I had to reach out to you." Liza forced a smile, trying to mask her growing unease. "Of course. It's good to see you, Rachel. What's this all about?" Rachel took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped her coffee cup. "I left the company because I couldn't be a part of what they were doing anymore. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, Liza, things they don't tell you until you're too deep in to get out." Liza frowned, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" "They're not just cutting corners, Liza," Rachel said, leaning in closer. "They're deliberately misleading clients, selling products they know don't work, or worse, products that could be harmful. And anyone who questions it, anyone who tries to do the right thing, gets pushed out or worse. I barely managed to leave before they could make things difficult for me." Liza's mind raced as she tried to process what Rachel was saying. "That can't be true," she said, though the conviction in her voice wavered. "I've been working there for months, and I haven't seen anything like that." "They're good at keeping it hidden," Rachel replied. "But trust me, it's there. And it's only going to get worse. I'm telling you this because I don't want you to get caught up in it. You're in too deep, Liza. You need to get out before it's too late." Liza sat back in her chair, feeling a cold sweat break out across her skin. She wanted to dismiss Rachel's warnings as paranoia or bitterness, but there was a sincerity in her voice that was hard to ignore. And deep down, Liza knew that the doubts she had been feeling were not just the result of office gossip. They were real, and they were starting to surface in ways she couldn't control. "I don't know what to say," Liza finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've worked so hard to get here, to build a life for my daughter. I can't just walk away from that." Rachel reached across the table and placed a hand on Liza's arm, her expression one of genuine concern. "I understand, but you need to be careful. The higher you climb, the harder it will be to leave. And once you're at the top, they'll do whatever it takes to keep you quiet." Liza left the cafe that day with a heavy heart and more questions than answers. She couldn't stop thinking about what Rachel had said, and the more she replayed their conversation in her mind, the more she realized that she had been ignoring the warning signs for too long. Back at work, Liza began to pay closer attention to the details she had previously overlooked. She noticed how certain clients were treated differently, how some deals were closed with a level of secrecy that made her uncomfortable, and how Barry Harlow and the other executives seemed to operate with an almost ruthless efficiency that left little room for ethical considerations. The more she saw, the more Liza's doubts grew, until she could no longer ignore the truth. The company she had worked so hard to succeed in was not what it appeared to be. The cracks in the foundation were widening, and Liza was standing on shaky ground. For the first time since joining Innovative Health Solutions, Liza began to question whether her success was worth the price she was being asked to pay. And as the shadows of doubt loomed larger, she knew that the decisions she made in the coming weeks would determine not just her future, but the future of everyone she cared about. Liza had been on edge ever since her meeting with Rachel, but it wasn't until a week later that the situation truly came to a head. She had been working late at the office, sifting through a mountain of paperwork and emails, trying to make sense of the vague unease that had been gnawing at her since Rachel's warning. The office was nearly empty, with only a few dim lights casting long shadows across the cubicles. Just as she was about to call it a night, her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the parking garage. Now." Liza's pulse quickened as she stared at the message. She didn't recognize the number, but something in her gut told her this was important. Glancing around the empty office, she hesitated for a moment before grabbing her coat and heading to the elevator. The parking garage was dark and mostly deserted, the only sounds being the distant hum of traffic and the occasional drip of water echoing through the concrete structure. As Liza reached her car, a figure stepped out of the shadows, causing her to jump. "Liza Drake?" the man asked, his voice low and urgent. He was tall and thin, with a scruffy beard and a nervous energy that made Liza instantly wary. "Who are you?" she demanded, her hand instinctively gripping her car keys as she sized him up. "My name's Mark," he said, glancing around as if checking for anyone who might be watching. "I used to work at Innovative Health Solutions. I was a data analyst there until they forced me out." Liza felt a chill run down her spine. "Why are you here? What do you want?" "I'm here to warn you," Mark replied, stepping closer. "You're in danger, Liza. I know you've heard things, maybe you've even seen some things that don't add up. I did too, and when I tried to blow the whistle, they ruined me. But that's nothing compared to what they'll do to you if you dig too deep." Liza's heart raced as she listened to Mark's words, her mind flashing back to Rachel's warning. "What are you talking about? What danger?" Mark's eyes were filled with urgency. "Barry Harlow and his team aren't just cutting corners, they're breaking the law, and they'll stop at nothing to protect their secrets. I tried to expose them, and now I'm living out of my car, barely scraping by. But you're in much deeper than I ever was. They've got their eye on you, Liza. They see you as a threat." Liza's throat tightened as the weight of Mark's words settled over her. "I don't understand. Why would they see me as a threat?" "Because you're smart, because you're successful, and because they know you've got a conscience," Mark replied, his voice rising with intensity. "You're not like them, Liza. But the more you learn, the more dangerous you become to them. They've already started watching you, and if you're not careful, they'll make sure you don't get the chance to expose them." Liza's mind raced as she processed everything Mark was saying. The thought that she might be in actual danger, that her success had made her a target, sent a wave of fear crashing over her. But even more terrifying was the realization that if something happened to her, Emma would be left alone, vulnerable. "What do you want me to do?" Liza asked, her voice trembling. "How do I protect myself? How do I protect my daughter?" Mark hesitated, glancing around once more before leaning in closer. "You need to get out, Liza. Walk away from the company before it's too late. Take your daughter and leave town if you have to. But whatever you do, don't let them think you're on to them. They'll try to make it look like everything's fine, like you're safe. But it's a lie. The moment they feel threatened, they'll turn on you. Liza swallowed hard, her mind reeling with possibilities. I need time to think. Don't take too long, Mark warned, stepping back into the shadows. You don't know what they're capable of. As Mark disappeared into the darkness, Liza stood frozen by her car, her thoughts swirling in a chaotic storm of fear and confusion. She had come so far, built so much, and now it seemed like everything was on the verge of collapse. But could she really just walk away from it all? Could she uproot Emma's life and leave everything behind? The next morning, Liza arrived at the office with a heavy heart, her mind still grappling with Mark's warning. She tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the conversation in the parking garage. The fear gnawed at her, making it difficult to concentrate. Later that day, as Liza was preparing to leave, Barry Harlow appeared at her desk, his usual confident smile in place. "Liza, can we talk for a moment?" Liza's pulse quickened as she nodded and followed Barry into his office. The door closed behind them, and Barry gestured for her to sit down. "I've noticed you seem a bit distracted lately," Barry began, his tone casual but probing. "Is everything all right?" Liza forced a smile, trying to mask her anxiety. "I'm fine, just a lot on my plate, I guess." Barry nodded, leaning back in his chair. "You're doing great work, Liza. Really, you've been a tremendous asset to the company. But I want to make sure you're not feeling overwhelmed. If there's anything you need, any concerns you have, you can always come to me." There was something in Barry's eyes, a subtle glint that made Liza uneasy. She remembered Mark's warning, the way he had said they would try to make her feel safe, to lull her into a false sense of security. "Thanks, Barry," Liza replied, keeping her tone neutral. "I appreciate that." Barry's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You've got a bright future here, Liza. I want to see you succeed. Just remember, we're all in this together. We take care of our own." Liza nodded, the weight of his words settling over her like a shroud. Barry's reassurance was meant to be comforting, but it felt more like a warning, a reminder that she was deeply entrenched in a world where loyalty was paramount, and dissent was dangerous. As she left Barry's office, Liza felt a surge of conflicting emotions. On one hand, she wanted to believe that everything would be fine, that she could continue her ascent without consequence. But on the other hand, Mark's words echoed in her mind, a stark reminder that she was treading on dangerous ground. That night, Liza sat in her new home, watching Emma sleep peacefully in her bed. The fear for her daughter's safety gnawed at her, growing stronger with each passing moment. She knew that whatever decision she made, it would impact Emma's future as well as her own. In the end, Liza decided to stay. The thought of uprooting their lives and walking away from everything she had worked so hard to build was too much to bear. She would stay, but she would be cautious, vigilant. She would continue to succeed, but she would do so with her eyes wide open, aware of the dangers lurking beneath the surface. Liza was determined to protect her daughter, to keep her safe at all costs. But as she drifted off to sleep that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that the cracks in the foundation were growing wider, and that it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. The atmosphere at Innovative Health Solutions was electric. The entire office buzzed with excitement and anticipation as they prepared to launch their latest product, a revolutionary painkiller that promised to change the landscape of pain management. This was the moment the company had been working toward for months, and Liza Drake was at the center of it all. Liza had been deeply involved in the development and marketing of the new drug, which they named Panacea. Barry Harlow had personally entrusted her with the responsibility of spearheading the campaign, and she had risen to the challenge with her usual tenacity and drive. Panacea was unlike anything else on the market. It was touted as a miracle drug, a powerful painkiller that was effective for a wide range of conditions, from chronic pain to post-surgical recovery. The formula was said to be fast-acting, long-lasting, and with fewer side effects than existing medications. It was a breakthrough, and Liza knew that if it succeeded, it would solidify her position within the company and secure her future. The launch day arrived with much fanfare. Liza stood alongside Barry at the press conference, beaming with pride as they unveiled Panacea to the world. The event was a resounding success, with media outlets and medical professionals alike praising the drug's potential. Orders began pouring in almost immediately, and the company's stock price soared. The marketing blitz that followed was nothing short of relentless. Liza had orchestrated a nationwide campaign, with television commercials, print ads, and online promotions saturating the market. Doctors were being courted with lavish dinners and incentives, while patients were promised relief like never before. The company's sales team was working overtime, and the numbers reflected their efforts. Panacea was flying off the shelves. As the weeks went by, Liza's life seemed to be on an upward trajectory. Her hard work was paying off, and she was enjoying the fruits of her labor. The success of Panacea brought her more recognition, more bonuses, and more opportunities. Her social circle expanded as she mingled with influential people in the industry, and she and Emma were settling into their new life comfortably. But just as Liza was beginning to feel secure, the first signs of trouble appeared. It started with a few scattered reports, patients experiencing unexpected side effects after taking Panacea. At first, the complaints seemed minor: nausea, dizziness, headaches. Liza brushed them off, thinking they were just the usual teething problems that came with any new drug. However, as more reports came in, the side effects became more alarming. Patients were suffering from severe allergic reactions, extreme fatigue, and even fainting spells. There were whispers of worse cases, but Liza pushed those thoughts to the back of her mind. She had seen the clinical trial data. Panacea was safe. Besides, no drug was perfect, and these issues could be dealt with. But then the situation escalated. A series of hospitalizations linked to Panacea began to surface. Patients were being admitted with symptoms ranging from acute respiratory distress to heart palpitations. The media started to take notice, and soon, there were stories circulating about the potential dangers of the new drug. Liza's phone rang constantly as she fielded calls from concerned doctors, patients, and even the press. The once celebrated drug was now under scrutiny, and Liza found herself caught in the crossfire. The company's PR team was working overtime to contain the damage, but the situation was spiraling out of control. The tension within the company was palpable. Barry called an emergency meeting, where he assured everyone that the situation was under control. He dismissed the adverse reactions as isolated incidents, blown out of proportion by the media. But Liza could see the strain in his eyes, the way his voice wavered ever so slightly when he spoke. As the meeting concluded, Liza returned to her office, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The spike in adverse reactions was too significant to ignore, and the thought that Panacea might be harming people made her stomach turn. That night, Liza sat in her living room, staring blankly at the television. Emma was asleep, blissfully unaware of the turmoil that her mother was facing. Liza's thoughts drifted to the patients who had been affected, to the families who were now suffering because of a drug she had helped bring to market. For the first time, Liza began to question everything. She had always prided herself on her integrity, on doing the right thing. But now, she was part of a machine that seemed more concerned with profits than with people's lives. The realization hit her hard: Panacea wasn't the miracle drug they had promised. It was a ticking time bomb, and she was at the heart of it. Liza knew she had to do something, but the fear of what might happen if she spoke up paralyzed her. Barry's reassurances rang hollow in her ears, and the warnings she had received from Mark played over and over in her mind. She was caught between her ambition and her conscience, and the weight of that decision pressed down on her like a vice. The chapter closed with Liza sitting alone in the dark, the glow of the television casting long shadows across the room. The soaring success she had worked so hard for now felt like a fragile house of cards, teetering on the brink of collapse. And as the first cracks began to show, Liza realized that the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. The tension within Innovative Health Solutions had been building for weeks, but the arrival of the FDA investigators marked a turning point. What had started as whispers of problems with Panacea had now grown into a full-blown crisis, and Liza Drake found herself at the center of the storm. It began with a knock on her office door one morning. When Liza looked up, she saw two stern-faced men in dark suits standing in the doorway. They introduced themselves as agents from the Food and Drug Administration, here to conduct a formal investigation into the safety of Panacea. Liza's heart sank. The FDA's involvement meant that the concerns about Panacea had escalated beyond anything the company could control with PR spin or strategic denials. The stakes were now immeasurably higher, and any misstep could lead to disastrous consequences, both for the company and for her personally. The investigators wasted no time in getting to work. They requested access to all of the company's records related to Panacea, clinical trial data, internal reports, marketing materials, and more. They interviewed employees at every level, from the research team to the sales department, asking probing questions about the drug's development and the decision-making processes that had led to its release. Liza was called in for questioning on the second day. Sitting across from the agents in a small, sterile conference room, she felt the full weight of their scrutiny. They asked her detailed questions about her role in the launch of Panacea, her knowledge of any potential side effects, and the marketing strategies she had overseen. Liza answered as truthfully as she could, but the fear of implicating herself gnawed at her. She was torn between protecting her career and acknowledging the growing unease that had been eating away at her. As the investigation dragged on, the atmosphere at Innovative Health Solutions became increasingly tense. Employees whispered nervously in the hallways, and the normally bustling office seemed to move at a slower pace, weighed down by the constant presence of the investigators. Barry Harlow, once the confident and charismatic leader, now seemed distant and preoccupied. His reassurances to the staff rang hollow, and Liza could see the cracks in his facade. Then, one afternoon, a bombshell dropped. The FDA agents had uncovered a series of internal memos that sent shockwaves through the company. These memos, dated from months before Panacea's launch, revealed discussions between senior executives that painted a disturbing picture. The documents suggested that the company had been aware of potential safety concerns with Panacea long before the drug was released to the public. The memos detailed conversations about possible adverse reactions that had been observed during early clinical trials. There were references to unacceptable risks and the need to minimize exposure, but rather than addressing these issues, the executives had chosen to downplay them. The language used in the memos was cold and calculating, discussing ways to suppress negative data, manage public perception, and maximize profits at any cost. Liza's hands trembled as she read through the documents. She felt a rising sense of horror as she realized the full extent of the deception. The drug she had worked so hard to promote, the product she had believed would change lives for the better, had been a ticking time bomb all along. And worse, the company had known. The discovery of these memos sent the investigation into overdrive. The FDA agents intensified their questioning, zeroing in on the executives who had been involved in the cover-up. Lawsuits from affected patients and their families began to pour in, and the media frenzy surrounding the case reached a fever pitch. Panacea was now being labeled a deadly drug in the press, and the once respected innovative health solutions was facing an existential crisis. Caught in the middle of it all, Liza felt like her world was collapsing. She had been so driven by her ambition, so focused on building a better life for herself and her daughter, that she had failed to see the warning signs. Now, the consequences of those choices were crashing down around her, and she was powerless to stop it. Barry called another emergency meeting, this time with the senior staff. He was a shadow of his former self, his voice lacking the confidence that had once inspired the team. He spoke of the need to weather the storm, to stay united in the face of adversity, but Liza could see the desperation in his eyes. As the meeting concluded, Barry asked Liza to stay behind. When they were alone, he tried to reassure her, insisting that they would get through this together. But Liza could no longer ignore the truth. The company she had once believed in had betrayed her, and now, her own integrity was at stake. That night, Liza returned home, exhausted and defeated. As she put Emma to bed, she wondered how she could ever explain to her daughter the choices she had made. The promise of a better life had led her down a dark path, and now she was trapped in a nightmare of her own making. Liza knew she had to make a decision, continue down the road she was on, complicit in the company's actions, or take a stand and expose the truth, no matter the cost. It was a choice that would define her future, and the lives of everyone involved. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Liza made a silent vow to herself. She would do whatever it took to protect her daughter and make things right, even if it meant losing everything she had worked for. The investigation had revealed the dark secrets of the company, but it had also opened Liza's eyes to the harsh realities of the world she had become a part of. And now, she had to find a way out. The investigation into Panacea had turned Liza's world upside down. As the FDA's scrutiny deepened, the revelations about innovative health solutions practices grew darker. The memos had been just the beginning. Liza was about to uncover the full extent of the fraud that had been perpetuated under her nose. Late one evening, as she worked late in her office trying to process the mounting pile of documents and reports, Liza received an anonymous envelope. It was a plain manila folder with no return address, and inside was a USB drive. The note accompanying it was brief: "The truth will set you free." Liza hesitated for a moment, then plugged the USB drive into her computer. A folder labeled "Confidential" opened, containing a series of files, emails, internal reports, and recordings. As she began to sift through the documents, her heart raced with apprehension and dread. The files revealed a web of deception far beyond what she had initially understood. There were detailed records of meetings where senior executives had deliberately falsified clinical trial results and manipulated data to downplay the drug's risks. There were emails discussing how to handle negative press and how to suppress whistleblowers. The most damning evidence came from a series of conversations where Barry Harlow himself was shown to have been deeply involved in orchestrating the cover-up. Liza's hands shook as she read through the emails. The realization that Barry, whom she had trusted and admired, was at the heart of this scandal was a crushing blow. The extent of the fraud was staggering. It was clear now that Panacea had been pushed to market despite known dangers, all in the name of profit. Lives had been put at risk, and the company had been willing to sacrifice integrity for financial gain. With the weight of this knowledge pressing down on her, Liza found herself at a crossroads. Her loyalty to Barry and the company had been based on a belief in their mission and their values. Now that those values had been shown to be a facade, she was torn between continuing to protect her career and her former boss, or taking a stand for what was right. Her dilemma was not just professional but deeply personal. How could she reconcile her ambition with the moral obligation to expose the truth? The decision seemed almost too great to bear. She had worked hard to build her life, and walking away from it all was daunting. Yet, as she looked at the evidence before her, she realized that continuing to stay silent would make her complicit in the harm being done. The very essence of her character was at stake. As Liza grappled with these thoughts, her phone rang. It was Mark, the former employee who had initially warned her about the company's issues. Mark's voice was urgent, and he asked to meet with her. Reluctantly, Liza agreed, knowing that this might be her last chance to get outside perspective on the situation. The following day, Liza met Mark at a dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of town. He looked worn and anxious, but there was a resolve in his eyes. Mark had been tracking the investigation closely and had some critical information to share. "Liza, I know you're in a tough spot," Mark began. "But you need to understand the full scope of what's happening. The company is more corrupt than you can imagine. I've been working with some journalists who are digging into the story. They need someone from the inside to confirm the details." Mark's offer was unexpected. He was proposing that she join forces with the journalists to expose the truth, which would mean going public with everything she had learned. It was a dangerous path, but it was also a way to ensure that the story would get the attention it needed. "Why are you helping me?" Liza asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I believe in doing the right thing, even when it's hard, Mark replied. I've seen what this company can do, and I don't want to see more lives ruined. You have a chance to make a difference here. Liza felt a surge of conflicting emotions. The fear of retribution, the uncertainty of what would happen next, and the burden of her own complicity all weighed heavily on her. But Mark's offer was also a lifeline, a chance to rectify her mistakes and fight for justice. After a tense few moments, Liza made her decision. She agreed to work with Mark and the journalists, knowing that it would mean exposing herself and potentially facing severe repercussions. The risk was immense, but the stakes were even higher. She could no longer be a passive participant in the company's deceit. As Liza left the cafe, a sense of resolve began to settle over her. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was determined to see it through. She had taken the first step towards making things right, and although the path was uncertain, she knew that she had to face the consequences of her actions and fight for the truth. The chapter closed with Liza staring out at the cityscape from the cafe window, a reflection of her determined yet troubled face visible in the glass. The conspiracy was unraveling, and she was now a key player in a battle that would test her integrity and courage. The fallout from the investigation into Panacea was swift and unforgiving. The revelations of fraud and misconduct had sent shockwaves through the pharmaceutical industry, and the impact on innovative health solutions was immediate and devastating. Within days of the report's release, the company's stock price began a dramatic plunge. What had once been a symbol of success and growth was now a sinking ship, and investors were scrambling to salvage what they could. The financial markets reacted with brutal efficiency, stockholders dumped their shares, and the value of the company plummeted to unprecedented lows. The once celebrated startup was now the subject of scathing headlines and investor lawsuits. In the midst of the chaos, Liza felt the weight of the situation bearing down on her. Her career, once on the rise, was now in tatters. The media had latched onto her role in the company, scrutinizing her every move. Liza's name was being dragged through the mud, and she found herself caught in a maelstrom of negative press and public outrage. The office, once a bustling hive of activity, had turned into a ghost town. Employees were laid off, departments were shut down, and the atmosphere was thick with fear and uncertainty. The once grand promises of success had evaporated, replaced by a sense of impending doom. Barry Harlow, who had once been the charismatic face of the company, now revealed his true nature. As the pressure mounted, Barry's demeanor shifted from confident to desperate. He became increasingly erratic, lashing out at anyone who questioned him and blaming others for the company's failures. The once strong leader had become a shadow of his former self, a man unraveling under the weight of his own deception. Liza witnessed Barry's transformation firsthand. During a tense meeting with the remaining senior staff, Barry's frustration boiled over. He accused his team of betrayal and incompetence, refusing to accept responsibility for the scandal. His behavior grew more erratic by the day, and it became clear that his once mighty leadership was now a facade, crumbling under the pressure of the truth. As Barry's true nature came to light, Liza struggled with her own sense of betrayal. The man she had admired and trusted was revealed to be a master manipulator, someone who had been willing to sacrifice anything and anyone for the sake of profit. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, and Liza felt a deep sense of loss, not only for the company but for her own misplaced trust that in the midst of the turmoil, Liza's personal life began to unravel as well. The stress of the situation took a toll on her relationship with Emma. Liza's focus on the crisis left her emotionally distant, and the strain began to show. Emma, though young, sensed her mother's anxiety and confusion, and their once close bond was tested. Liza's attempts to shield Emma from the worst of the upheaval proved to be a struggle. The impact of the scandal had seeped into their lives, affecting their home environment and their day-to-day interactions. The security and stability they had enjoyed were gone, replaced by a constant state of uncertainty. To add to her difficulties, Liza found herself grappling with legal battles and mounting personal debt. The company's downfall had led to a flood of lawsuits, and Liza, as a prominent figure in the scandal, was not immune to legal scrutiny. She faced accusations of negligence and complicity, and the weight of potential legal consequences only added to her stress. Despite her growing despair, Liza remained determined to see things through. She continued working with Mark and the journalists, providing them with crucial information and helping to uncover more details about the company's practices. Though it was a challenging and often dangerous endeavor, Liza felt a sense of purpose in her efforts to expose the truth and hold those responsible accountable. The chapter closed with Liza sitting alone in her dimly lit apartment, surrounded by stacks of papers and legal documents. The city lights outside her window flickered, casting a somber glow on her weary face. The world she had built was collapsing, and the future seemed uncertain. Yet, amidst the crumbling remnants of her career and personal life, Liza found a glimmer of hope in her commitment to uncovering the truth and seeking justice. The storm of scandal surrounding innovative health solutions was showing no signs of abating. The fallout from the investigation had continued to wreak havoc on Liza's life. With the company's stock in freefall, Barry Harlow's public unraveling, and mounting personal and legal troubles, Liza faced an overwhelming sense of dread. Amidst the chaos, the most pressing concern was the safety of her daughter, Emma. One evening, as Liza sat alone in her apartment, the reality of her situation hit her with a chilling clarity. The relentless media scrutiny and the increasing threats from those involved in the scandal made it clear that staying in Central Florida was no longer safe. The investigation had drawn the attention of dangerous people who had much to lose, and Liza couldn't risk Emma's safety any longer. Liza made the difficult decision to flee, taking Emma with her to a place where they could find some semblance of security and distance from the dangerous situation they were entangled in. But before she could escape, she needed to ensure that she had all the evidence she could gather to expose the truth and protect herself legally. It was a precarious balance between securing her safety and finalizing her efforts to bring the company's crimes to light. The first step in her escape plan was to discreetly gather the most damning evidence against innovative health solutions. Liza knew that the information she had obtained from the USB drive was crucial, but there were additional pieces of evidence that needed to be collected. She decided to revisit the office one last time, risking her safety to retrieve critical documents and recordings. Under the cover of darkness, Liza sneaked into the deserted office building. The security was minimal, and most employees had already been laid off or left in haste. She made her way to her old office, which had been abandoned and left in disarray. There, she began sorting through her files, looking for any remaining evidence that could substantiate her claims. She collected documents, emails, and other files that detailed the company's misconduct and shady dealings. Liza was acutely aware of the risks involved. The security cameras were still operational, and she had to be careful not to leave any trace of her presence. As she worked, her mind raced with thoughts of what she would do if she were caught. She had to act quickly but methodically, knowing that every minute spent there increased the chances of discovery. After gathering the necessary documents, Liza left the office and returned to her apartment, where she began to prepare for their departure. She contacted Mark and shared her plans with him. Mark offered his support and promised to help her secure a safe place for her and Emma once they left Central Florida. His help was a beacon of hope in an otherwise dark time. With the evidence securely packed and a destination in mind, Liza focused on arranging their escape. She booked a flight under an alias to avoid any potential detection. She also made arrangements for a temporary safe house, where she and Emma could stay until things settled down. The night of their departure arrived, and Liza felt a mix of relief and anxiety. She carefully packed their belongings, ensuring they had essentials and the crucial evidence she had gathered. Emma was asleep, unaware of the full extent of the danger they were in. Liza looked at her daughter's peaceful face and felt a pang of guilt for having to uproot their lives, but she knew it was necessary to protect her. Liza loaded their bags into the car and made the drive to the airport. The city lights of Central Florida blurred in her rearview mirror as they left behind the life she had once known. She was acutely aware of the risks of being discovered, but she was driven by the need to safeguard her daughter and seek justice. At the airport, Liza and Emma boarded the flight without incident. As the plane took off, Liza looked out the window, feeling a mixture of apprehension and hope. They were leaving behind a life fraught with danger, but ahead lay an uncertain future. The escape was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with the promise of safety and the possibility of redemption. The chapter closed with Liza and Emma in the quiet of their airplane seats. As Liza held her daughter close, she made a silent vow to see this through, to protect Emma, to expose the corruption of innovative health solutions, and to rebuild their lives far from the shadows of the past. The escape was a critical step towards finding safety and justice, and Liza was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Liza Drake had always known that the truth would be dangerous, but as she prepared for the final confrontation, the stakes had never felt higher. The weight of the evidence she had gathered, coupled with the knowledge that her actions could bring down a powerful corporation, was almost suffocating. Yet, there was no turning back. She had fled with her daughter, gathered the proof, and now it was time to face the people responsible for the deception and corruption at Innovative Health Solutions. Liza's escape plan had bought her some time, but she knew that the company's top executives, particularly Barry Harlow, would stop at nothing to silence her. She had been careful, avoiding detection and staying one step ahead of those who sought to find her, but now it was time to take the fight to them. With the help of Mark and the journalists she had been working with, Liza set up a meeting with Barry in the board of directors. It was a risky move, but she knew that confronting them directly was the only way to force their hand. The meeting was arranged under the guise of a final negotiation, but Liza had no intention of making any deals. She was there to expose the truth. The location of the meeting was carefully chosen, a neutral, high-profile venue that would make it difficult for Barry or the board to try anything overtly violent or illegal. The room was stark, with a long table in the center, flanked by windows that let in the harsh light of a gray afternoon. The atmosphere was tense as Liza entered, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. Barry Harlow was already there, flanked by members of the board. His expression was a mix of contempt and forced calm. The man who had once been the confident, charming leader of a rising company now appeared worn and cornered. The board members, too, seemed on edge, aware that this meeting could determine the future of the company and their own fates. As Liza sat down across from them, she could feel the weight of their stares. But she had no time for fear. She pulled out a thick folder, filled with the damning evidence she had collected. The room fell silent as she began to speak, her voice steady and clear. "This ends today," Liza began, her eyes locking onto Barry's. "I have everything I need to expose the full extent of the fraud, the cover-ups, and the criminal negligence that this company has committed. It's over." Barry's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent, his gaze cold and calculating. One of the board members leaned forward, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Ms. Drake," he began, his tone condescending, "let's not be hasty. We can find a way to resolve this, perhaps some compensation for your trouble, a non-disclosure agreement. There's no need for this to become public." Liza felt a surge of anger. The audacity of their offer, even now, was infuriating. But she kept her composure, shaking her head. "No," she said firmly. "There's no buying me off. This isn't about money. This is about justice, for the people who were harmed, for the lives that were destroyed by your greed." Barry finally spoke, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're making a mistake, Liza. You think you can just walk in here and take us down? Do you really think you're going to walk out of this unscathed?" Liza met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm not afraid of you, Barry. I have everything I need to bring this company to its knees. And if anything happens to me, the evidence goes public. You can't stop this." The tension in the room was palpable, the air thick with unspoken threats. Liza could see the fear in the board members' eyes, the realization that they were cornered. But Barry's expression remained hard, his mind clearly racing for a way out, and then, in a move that caught everyone off guard, Barry lunged across the table, his hand reaching for Liza's throat. The sudden violence sent chairs skidding and papers flying as chaos erupted in the room. Liza was knocked back, struggling to fend off Barry's attack. The board members scrambled, some trying to intervene while others backed away in shock, but before Barry could do any real harm, the door burst open, and a team of law enforcement officers stormed in. Mark had anticipated the possibility of violence and had tipped off the authorities, who arrived just in time. Barry was pulled off Liza and restrained, his face twisted in rage and desperation. As Barry was led away in handcuffs, the reality of the situation began to sink in for the board members. The evidence Liza had brought was quickly secured by the authorities, and the room slowly returned to a tense silence. Liza, shaken but unharmed, stood up, her resolve unbroken. She looked around the room, taking in the faces of the men who had tried to cover up their crimes, and felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The truth was finally out, and there was no going back. The chapter closed with Liza stepping out of the meeting room and into the cool afternoon air. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past months begin to lift. The fight wasn't over. There would be trials, more revelations, and likely more dangers ahead. But for the first time in a long while, Liza felt a sense of hope. She had faced down her enemies, exposed the truth, and protected her daughter. Now, she could begin to rebuild, knowing that she had done the right thing, no matter the cost. The fallout from the final confrontation at Innovative Health Solutions was swift and far-reaching. Within hours of the meeting, news of Barry Harlow's arrest and the massive fraud scandal broke across every major media outlet. The public was shocked as the details of the company's unethical practices and criminal activities came to light, sparking a media frenzy that would last for weeks. For Liza Drake, the aftermath was both a whirlwind and a time of profound reflection. The evidence she had gathered was crucial in bringing down the corrupt executives and securing convictions. The trial became one of the most high-profile cases of the decade, with Liza's testimony playing a central role in exposing the depth of the conspiracy. The media portrayed her as a whistleblower, a brave single mother who had risked everything to do the right thing. But behind the headlines, Liza's life was far from easy. As the trial progressed, the threats against her and her daughter, Emma, intensified. The people she had exposed were powerful, with deep connections, and there were those who wanted to silence her for good. Recognizing the danger, the authorities placed Liza and Emma in witness protection. It was a difficult decision, but one that was necessary for their safety. In her new life, Liza had to leave behind everything she had ever known. She was given a new identity, a new home, and a new job in a small, quiet town far from Central Florida. It was a stark contrast to the life she had once led, filled with the highs and lows of the corporate world. The isolation was challenging, and Liza often found herself longing for the familiarity of her old life. Despite its dangers, Emma, too, had to adjust to the changes. She missed her friends and the life they had before, but Liza did her best to make their new life as stable and comforting as possible. Despite the challenges, there was a sense of peace that came with the distance from their past. Liza knew that this was the only way to ensure Emma's safety and give her a chance at a normal life. As the months passed, Liza had more time to reflect on the choices she had made and the path that had led her to this point. The decisions she had faced were not easy, and the consequences had been severe. She had lost her home, her friends, and her identity. But she had also gained something far more important: her integrity. In the end, Liza knew that she had done the right thing, even if it had come at a great personal cost. The media eventually moved on to other stories, and the frenzy surrounding the trial faded. Barry Harlow and several other top executives were sentenced to long prison terms, and the company was dismantled, its assets liquidated to pay for the damages caused. Liza received a settlement, but it was a hollow victory. The money could never make up for what she and Emma had lost. In her quiet new life, Liza found solace in small things: Emma's laughter, the beauty of the countryside, the kindness of her new neighbors. She began to rebuild, slowly and carefully, focusing on giving Emma the stable and loving upbringing she deserved. Liza took on a job that allowed her to work from home, ensuring she could be there for Emma as much as possible. Liza also started journaling, writing down her thoughts and feelings as a way to process everything she had been through. It was in these quiet moments of reflection that she began to find a sense of peace. She had been through a harrowing ordeal, but she had emerged stronger and more determined than ever to protect her daughter and live a life of integrity. The final chapter of Liza's story was one of redemption and new beginnings. She had been forced to confront her past, make difficult choices, and live with the consequences. But in doing so, she had found a sense of purpose and clarity. Liza knew that she would never forget what had happened, but she also knew that she had the strength to move forward. As she watched Emma play in the yard of their new home, Liza felt a sense of hope for the future. They were safe, they were together, and that was all that mattered. The journey had been long and difficult, but Liza was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that she had done everything in her power to protect her daughter and stand up for what was right. In the quiet of their new life, Liza found peace in knowing that she had made the right choices, and that, despite everything, they would be okay. The story of Liza Drake was one of courage, resilience, and ultimately, redemption. Liza Drake and her daughter, Emma, had settled into a quiet life in a small, peaceful town, a world away from the turmoil they had once known. Their new home was a cozy cottage at the edge of the town, surrounded by trees and a garden that Liza had begun to nurture with a care she had rarely had time for before. The simplicity of their surroundings brought a sense of calm that Liza desperately needed after everything they had been through. The town itself was the kind where everyone knew each other by name, where neighbors waved from their porches, and the local diner was the heart of the community. For Liza and Emma, it was the perfect place to start over. Liza had found work at a small bookstore, a job that allowed her to keep a low profile while spending more time with Emma. The days were slow and unhurried, a stark contrast to the frenetic pace of her former life, yet, even in this idyllic setting, the past lingered like a shadow. Liza couldn't completely shake the memories of what had happened, of the choices she had made, the people she had exposed, and the dangers they had faced. There were nights when she woke up in a cold sweat, haunted by nightmares of those final, harrowing moments. Emma, too, had her own struggles, occasionally asking about the friends and life they left behind, questions that Liza could only answer with vague reassurances. But with time, those dark memories began to fade, replaced by new routines and small joys. Liza found comfort in the simple things: cooking dinner with Emma, reading by the fireplace, or walking through the quiet streets of their new town. These moments, though ordinary, were precious to her. They were proof that life could go on, that they could find happiness again, even after everything. Emma, too, was finding her way. She made new friends at school, joined a local soccer team, and began to smile more often. Liza watched her daughter grow stronger, more resilient, and it filled her with a quiet pride. Despite the difficulties, Emma was thriving, and Liza knew that was the most important thing. One afternoon, as they walked home from school, Emma looked up at Liza and asked, "Are we safe now, Mom?" Liza paused, feeling the weight of the question. She looked around at the peaceful streets, at the golden light filtering through the trees, and then down at her daughter's hopeful face. "Yes, sweetheart," she said, squeezing Emma's hand. "We're safe now." For the first time in a long while, Liza felt that it might actually be true. They had been through so much, but they had come out the other side stronger. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined them. As they approached their home, Liza noticed the first buds of spring beginning to bloom in the garden. It was a small sign, but to her, it felt like a promise of renewal, of new beginnings, and of hope for the future. Liza knew they still had a long way to go, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she was optimistic. They had found a new life, a new start, and with it, the possibility of happiness and peace. And as they stepped inside their home, Liza felt a quiet certainty that, no matter what came next, they would face it together.